Welcome everyone to Assistive Technology Starter Kit webinar from Techability. I'm Neil Harrod Beck and I'll be guiding you through today. I've also got some contributions from Phil McIntyre, who's not here today, but he's sent through his suggestions. Any questions, feel free to ask them throughout. Why are we doing this webinar? Well, despite the general advocacy for AT by everyone involved, there's no credible evidence to suggest that everyone who could benefit from AT has access to appropriate AT devices and services. And hopefully that's why we're all here today, really, is because we want to give students those benefits. That quote's actually from Eddie Burns' Rapid Literature Review on Assistive Technology in Education. It's a really good start if you want to kind of understand about the kind of ecosystem that we're in terms of assistive technology and education. From the same article, Eddie Byrne published this AT expectancy figures, which is a really good guide to start to understand how many students we would expect within a population to be using AT. So starting from the top with sensory impairments, deaf and hard of hearing, blind and visually impaired, with physical disability, multiple disabilities, the expected use of AT is 100% there. Then working down the list, traumatic brain injury, autism, we're expecting between 50 to 75%. Learning disability, health impairment, cognitive disability, 25 to 35%. Speech language disorder and emotional disability, about 10 to 25%. Now, that's what we'd expect, but it isn't necessarily the final figure that we want to get to, really, because I'm sure there are lots. I'm looking at learning disability and looking at 25 to 35% using AT. I think the amount that would benefit would be much higher than that in particular, and lots of the other kind of areas as well. Let's think about where we're going to start from. And the set model is, well, the set framework is something that I work from in these kind of instances. As you notice, tools is at the end of that. So student, environments, tasks, and tools. So when we're thinking today about the kit, we're not just thinking about that alone. We're thinking about the student themselves, what their needs are, where they're going to be using it, what they're going to be carrying out with it. And then when we've got that information, it can help us with the tools a lot. So later on, when we're talking about the recommendations that we've got, that's based on previous students, previous environments, and previous tasks that we've worked in. Yours might be different. And what we want to do today is start to get you thinking that way, where you're working through your individual circumstances, which might change every year. Where to start? If you can, try before you buy. Lots of the suppliers are happy for you to have trials, and same with kind of software providers as well. If you get in touch with them, let them know that your role within the college is as an assistive technologist. They're much more likely to give you a trial and let you start using it. Think about future support and training. A lot of colleges and provisions fall into the trap of providing the technology, but they're missing out the support, the training, that kind of ongoing work to make it work. And it's not just the support and training for the student, it's also for those supporting the user and for the software itself. Read reviews where you can, get advice, use the sales team. If you're a member of the Techability Champions, ask within the community, who else has used this? How did you find it? Consider your scale and your budgets. Don't want to kind of run out of money after buying a few expensive bits of kit. Consult your staff and your users. Even if you don't feel that they have a great knowledge around assistive technology, they'll be the ones that are making use of it, and the sooner you can involve them, the better. It can really help in the longer term. Even though it takes a bit longer initially, bringing people along for the ride is really important. And value your time. So you might be able to spend 4 or 5 hours extra and get maybe a cheaper piece of kit, or find a bargain or something like that. But then how much is your time worth? And if you're working with a lot of different students, sometimes you've got to balance that. There's a useful guide called How Do You Know It? How Can You Show It? It's by Reed, Bowser, and Corsten. It was published way back in 2004, which I can't believe is 20 years ago. So some of the technology that it mentions in there, it seems a bit dated, and some of the ways that it's taught, maybe not the most recent, but it still remains one of the best guides out there of how to evaluate the effectiveness of the technologies we're using. Asks about what questions can be answered with data. It's about framing the question and then collecting and analyzing the data. So I've got a few examples here. I'm not going to talk through all of them. But the first one is the occupational therapist believes Kelly is activating a switch on purpose, but the classroom teacher and assistant believe it is random. How can the team tell if Kelly's actions are purposeful or random? Another one is the speech language pathologist strongly recommends a voice output device for Jason, but his parents are not sure it's needed because they understand him at home and prefer that Jason communicates with speech. How does the team decide whether or not to use a voice output device in some environments? So these are the kind of questions that we'll be asking, and that's what this resource can help you work out, is how do you frame those questions? How do you gather that information? And then how does that lead to buying better equipment? I've left some other examples in there as well, so you can use this as a reference slide. Now to the recommendations. This is Phil's set of recommendations in 2018. I thought it was quite interesting to kind of show how things have changed in 6 years and what things haven't changed as well. So interestingly enough, Grid 3, which is a communication software that also does an awful lot, is still on there. It's very good at outputting in different ways, supporting a lot of different students with a lot of different needs, but then also the inputs that you can use are very varied. It's worth mentioning that Phil was working in a specialist college at the time, so that recommendation would have been based for a specialist college. Large keyboards, also useful, clearer text, larger targets to hit, and often a more clear interface on the keyboard. Also recommending Claro, who have now merged with Read and Write, and that was a toolbar, but we've got a more modern recommendation for that. So Phil has added that in on, I believe, the next slide. Switch on a Manfrotto arm, which is the furthest to the right there. There's a yellow switch and a red switch, and they're on those kind of right angle kind of bars. You can adjust those and move them into different positions. They're heavy duty, and I've certainly seen some bashed around an awful lot, and they work very well. And then, interestingly enough, a learner's own phone, laptop, or tablet, so bringing their own device. So Phil's provided some up-to-date recommendations of what he would do now, and because now we're thinking about supporting people in general further education and specialist education, as there are students with disabilities in both, then he's created some for GFE. Now, it's worth mentioning that a lot of the ones in GFE will apply to specialist college, but maybe not the other way around. So I've included this first. High contrast keyboards, so a bit of a change there, but kind of focusing on the visual aspect there. There's an example of yellow letters on a black keyboard. Bit of a change in the wording in demo iPhone and Android phones. So I think that's to recognize that it's really useful to have a bank of mobile phones or iPhone devices that you can use with the students. They don't need to necessarily be have a SIM card in. They could just be on the college network, so they're secure, and they could have the apps and the settings there ready to go. So you can try them with students, use them as part of classroom activities, and start to build up that knowledge around the technology that's there. Sensory readable software, that's the bottom bar. I said that we had a bit of an updated version of a recommendation from Claro and Read and Write. So Phil's added readable in there. So nice simple interface with text to speech, a kind of global dictionary, different visual settings, and fairly good value as well in terms of you're not going to be paying a lot for it. Glean software, that's for note taking in classrooms. So that's very useful, especially if you're in a GFE college and you might not be able to take in everything in the class. You can take down audio notes, you can add bookmarks, you can take pictures. It gives you that fully comprehensive way of having notes so you can review work that you've attended. Light key software, that is prediction software, and it works in the background and it learns from you over time. The free version has so much prediction that's free per day, and then you have to pay for the upgraded version. But I quite like that it runs in the background. So that's Phil's for GFE College. Let me know if you've got any that you would recommend alongside that. For a specialist college, mixed it up a little bit with large and high contrast keyboards, which is a combination of the previous two. iPads for assessment, which is really useful if you're looking for a touchscreen device, and especially thinking that lots of young people do start using iPads now, whereas in the past they might have used computers. So there's a bit of a shift there, and it's good to have that in terms of assessment. He's kept in learner's own phone, laptop, and tablet there, and the grid software, and the switch on a Manfrotto arm. So there's a lot there that's remained the same within the specialist setting for Phil. Now, for me in 2018, I had Dragon Naturally Speaking. It was a long way ahead of the competition. I'd say that the inbuilt dictation in Microsoft products, in Google, in Apple has come a long way. And actually that's from Nuance, the makers of Dragon, who have fed into those systems. I had Google Chrome because I enjoyed all the different browser add-ons that you could have at the time. It brought in lots of different tools that you could have in your browser and add them. Xmind is a mind mapping tool, and that's the one at the bottom left there. And I still like that, and I almost included it, but I didn't want to have it twice, so I still recommend it an awful lot. It's a really good way of taking down notes, adding in mixed media. So in that one, there's a picture of a rainforest. It could also be audio notes, and then you can output it into a Word document or something similar, and it will lay it out almost as a kind of essay plan or something like that. So it could be that bridge for students who are looking to write longer pieces of work with more structure. A touchscreen is often overlooked. I'd still stay with this as a recommendation, especially as it's an input that a lot of young people are used to using. And that could be a touchscreen monitor, touchscreen laptop, touchscreen on a mobile phone. It's just a useful interface device and often overlooked as an input method. And I recommend Light Key as well. So that's remained as a recommendation between me and Phil. So updating mine, I've changed it up a little bit. I think I've moved away from Chrome browser now as a recommendation. I'd prefer Edge browser because it has immersive reader built in, and it has the read aloud functions built in. You can access them from the top bar itself, which is a lot better than having to go to a store, add in certain things from the browser store, as Google has taken that approach. And the picture on the left is what the immersive reader, what the toolbar looks like. There's lots of things you can change. You can have text to speech, all kinds of visual options, and much more, including picture dictionary. On-screen keyboards is something that I would probably add to the touchscreen because it can make a touchscreen much more accessible for people. So not only means that you can customize the size of the keys often, it's built in, and it also means that for students who might struggle with changing their visual focus, so changing between the screen and a keyboard, it means you can hold it the same because you can look in the same kind of area. I'm going to add headset because I think a headset allows you to do dictation in lots of different devices. If it was a mobile phone, you might look to have something that's Bluetooth. And I think if it was a PC, it means you can use what's built into Microsoft Word or Google Docs. So there's a few different options there, but having a headset means that learners will feel more confident in using that, knowing that they're not making a noise out loud, and they can work to themselves quietly with better concentration sometimes with the sound. And it's a device that works for multiple things. So could be YouTube videos and things like that as well. I'm going to include reader and scanning pen. I think most GFEs would benefit from having a few on loan, even if you use it alongside immersive reader, even if you use it alongside mobile phone apps. It's a useful device, especially for reading kind of the odd word here and there. And it might be preferable to a mobile phone sometimes because it's specifically designed for that and it's less distracting. Then I've included the tile as well, which is more for kind of independent skills. It's thinking about students who are going out and about, who are trying to take control of and responsibility for their things. There's different size devices. So the one in the background there is a kind of credit card size. Then there are smaller ones that can fit on key fobs and things like that. And it essentially means that you link it to an app and then you can find your wallet or your keys or whatever it is that you've lost. And then also from that device, if you have your keys or your wallet or whatever it is that you're trying to keep safe, if you press the tile, it will then ring your phone, so you can find your phone. And if you've lost everything, you can go onto a device, log in with your account, and find the last place that they all were. So that's really useful, especially if you've got something like ADHD and you're struggling to keep organization of your things. So those are my GFE recommendations. These aren't comprehensive at all. It's just a few things that we would think of start using. With a specialist college, I need to thank the champions because they've recommended to me the BJoy Hand A. I don't think they named it the best, but it's a great device. It's the one at the top right there. So it's a small plastic box with a small joystick controller, just a thumb controller with 4 programmable buttons around it. So it's really simple. I think this would be really accessible for a lot of different learners. And I think it would be a really good assessment piece of kit for students who maybe couldn't use a touchscreen, couldn't use a mouse, but had some dexterity and control. I think that would really help. Google Home and Amazon Alexa, I'd say, are almost always going to be on the list just because lots of students, whether they're using a communication aid or their own voice, it makes it easier to access a lot of different things that you can do, like setting alarms, organizing your day, finding out about the weather, finding out about what's going on in the world, and much more, including fun things like playing music. There's an awful lot you can do with them, and they're just great little devices to have. I've then got the It Click On Plus, and this is more for cause and effect or environmental controls. So this is the one at the top left, and it's a white box with a series of different functions and 2 plug sockets there with 2 switch adapters. So the idea is that you'll hit a switch and then a device will turn on. And that could be something fun, it could be something practical. It's really up to how you want to use that. It could also be used, we've seen it used well in cooking classes and things like that for students who are using blenders and things. Of course, it only turns the power on. So if there's another power button on the device itself, you have to think about that. So it's worth having to think about what devices you're going to connect up to it. Then I've got the Bluetooth, which is a wireless switch device. It's the one at the bottom left with a yellow button on one side and a blue button on the other side. So on a very simple basis, it's a wireless switch set that can be used with computers, it can be used with tablets, it could even be used with mobile phones as well, and yeah, things like iPads and iPhones. So that in itself is very accessible, given that it covers all those different devices. What I also like is it's got two switch ports in there, meaning you can use any two different switches with it. So for your money, you're not only getting a kind of switch set itself that's accessible with things, you're also getting a switch adapter, which you can then plug other switches in that might be more suited to that learner. So in terms of flexibility and a device that's really good if you're starting out with switches, I think that's quite good. I'm also going to have to go for the Switch adapted inclusive MP3 player. Really, that's the one in the middle with the nice clear yellow buttons. And yeah, playing music is something that people with disabilities should be able to do. It could be audiobooks as well. So there's a lot of different functions there. And it's, yeah, again, you can connect different switches to it. So mine's quite switch focused. Again, as a specialist college, you might have any learners that use switches. So this is very dependent on the setting that you have. But I think between the GFE and the specialist college recommendations, there's probably a few things in there that will work for your learners. I made my list and then I couldn't resist. I had to add in a bonus slide about gaming. So I had to recommend the Xbox Adaptive Controller. This means that learners can use different switches, different joysticks, different devices. Not only works with Xbox, but it also works with Windows PC games as well. So the great thing about it as well is that they've kept the price down. So I believe it's only £75, which for something that's a specialist piece of kit that does that much is pretty good value. So it's a really useful start off if you're trying to look into accessible gaming with learners. Okay, so those are all the tech recommendations that we've got for you. So open the question up to you if you want to put it in the chat, or if you're kind of listening to this later, just think about what are the things that you'd recommend, what are the things that you'd have in your starter kit, or what are the unmet needs? What do your students need that they don't already have? So have a think about that and think about what will be on your list. This is what I often, I've added more to it since then actually, but this is what I have in my kit. So we've got the different types of keyboards that we spoke about. I almost had the miniature keyboard in there as well with a key guard, which is useful. Different rollerball, different joysticks at the bottom left that are wireless. GoPro camera, you can use it with voice commands. A little touchpad there, like the ones off the laptop. They're quite useful for students who have limited use of, well, limited movement. We've got a Tapio switch adapter there, a Windows switch adapter, all kinds of different things, and 3 different devices as well, including iPad, a Windows tablet, and a Windows laptop, and the tile I mentioned earlier. And that's just what I can use kind of portably. If I was in a specialist college or a general college, then I might have much more than that. You don't need all the kit. You just need to know what you need for assessment initially, and then to be able to respond to student need. So if you had every single different type of keyboard combination there, you would have tens, if not hundreds, of different keyboard combinations. So just start thinking about lowercase, uppercase, large keys, small keys, just a few different variations on it so you can try what works with the students that you've got. Where do you buy it? Often best from the software developer or the manufacturer themselves. So that's a really good place to start. They often have better support as they have a vested interest in it working, meaning that you can make use. So you could set up a call with them initially for them to talk through the product and the features, maybe do that with your team or your college staff or students, just to really build that connection and that knowledge amongst your team and kind of make use of that almost as free training There are resellers as well, so I'd also check Inclusive Technology, Microlink, Sight and Sound, any other suppliers that you know are out there. It's worth checking. Some have different prices, some of them have different policies on testing, so it's worth finding out about them. You can also try Amazon, eBay, or anywhere that sells things, but just remember that good support is often priceless. If you think about the amount of resources that we put into a student accessing their curriculum, if you really added all the costs up of the staff, the spaces, the transport to get them there, their time that they've put in as well. If you add all of that up and think about the cost of a product not being supported or going wrong, when it might be that missing piece, then it's really important. So think about the support. What happens if it goes wrong? Who do we speak to? How are we going to get this fixed? How long is it covered for? So what next? If you've gone out and had your kind of spending spree and bought the equipment, just be clear who's responsible for it. It might be on a short-term basis where you're lending out equipment, or it might be that you have particular pieces of equipment that are loaned out to a particular person. I'd steer clear of just leaving them in classes where lots of different people use it. It has a really strong chance of going missing then. Obviously, you know your college is best, but yeah, just try and think about who's responsible for it. Have clear expectations. How long is it going to be used? How is it going to be used? Uh, who's it going to be used with? And mark it where necessary. I've got the example there of a Dymo tag maker, but there are other ways of marking it, and especially for security and safety. There's different ways. As I mentioned before, remember to roll out the training and the support. Let people have a play with the tech as well. You can have days where for CPD and things like that, you lay all your technology out and you let people just come and have a go with it all and see what they'd use. And often you'll have, oh, I think this would be really good for insert student name here. So it's a really good way to get that connection and set that expectation that the tech is there for people to use, really. Have an end of life plan. So think about moving the tech on if it's getting a little bit old and you can still get some value out of it. Think about not just all of your kit getting old and into disrepair and then doing one large shop. We want to kind of make sure that it's kept updated and that we plan in our funding and everything else that there'll be a kind of continuity there for the students. And ultimately launch them, get them out there, get them being used. We'd rather kit get broken in the end or have a chance of getting broken or lost than not being used at all. It needs to go out there and it needs to be used. Don't forget the little things that will make it happen. So Velcro to attach things like switches, non-slip mats, especially if you've got students with lap trays. Need some cleaning products as well. Keep everyone safe. If you think about hands, what they touch through the day, that's a kind of common thing. If we're touching screens, if we're touching devices, keep everyone safe there. Use some stands to try and keep things at either eye level if you're trying to look at them, or at hand level if you're trying to yeah, do things like typing and moving your hands to control products. And that's it. So would love to hear how you get on. If you're buying anything, then just let us know. As always, sign up to the Tech Ability newsletter. It's a good way of staying in touch. If you've wanted to know more about the products today and how to use them, or more about assessment, we run training, which is a lot more extended than these kind of short webinars. And you can find all about that through our mailing list on the Tech Ability newsletter. So thank you all for listening. Drop us emails if you're interested in finding out anything else or want to know any particular webinars. We're at techability@natspec.org.uk. You can catch us on X, or as it was Twitter before, at tech_ability1. We've included our website there as well. And yeah, thank you for listening, everybody. I'm going to call into the webinar there, but any questions, then feel free to ask.